In a twisted way, I don't even blame my family for killing me. I gave them a reason. I gave them the chance. I gave them the means. But if my rebirth has a purpose, then make it to save the boy whose soul I corrupted. Modern Queen Tales presents Rebirth, Revenge, Redemption, a second chance for me and the son I should have loved. Remember to like, subscribe, and above all, enjoy. Without further ado, let's give these pages a flip. Prologue: The death of a life worthless. My life had always been a glittering, effortless ascent. Abigail Stone, heiress. The name itself felt like a promise of unlimited sunshine and velvet cushions. I was born on top of the world, and I stayed there, demanding everything and giving nothing in return. I treated money like water, people like accessories, and consequences as inconveniences other people worried about. My first marriage was a joke dictated by my family's legal team. They needed to clean up a messy, highly public indiscretion, my unplanned pregnancy, and secure my inheritance. My husband was a handsome, malleable stranger who wanted my money. I wanted to keep my lifestyle. It was a perfect, loveless transaction. When Cain was born, he was merely the unfortunate consequence of my recklessness, a tiny, demanding shadow on my bright horizon. He was a burden, a noise, a thing that needed attention I wasn't interested in giving. His father's death a few years later should have been a turning point, a moment where I matured or grieved, but I did neither. I saw it as a swift return to freedom, a chance to replace one disposable husband with a man who truly saw me, Parker Travers. Parker was sunshine and flattery, a charming single dad with two perfectly blonde, equally charming twin daughters, Tiffany and Heather. They were everything my own son was not, cheerful, easy, and desperate for my attention. To keep Parker and his ready-made functional family happy, I made a choice that still felt like a shard of glass in my soul. Even years later, I sent Cain away. He was 11 then, already cold and quiet, a boy whose eyes seemed too old, too knowing. At that age, he already had the habit of finding things, taking them apart and making new objects with them. Toys, tools, art projects. He could make anything he wanted out of scrap and fallen tree branches. Everyone thought he was weird for it, myself included. He only spoke when necessary, and when he did, his words were weapons, sharp, intelligent, and designed to cut whoever had dared disrespect him, which was often me. I called him troubled, and I found a place that promised to fix him. A strict, almost prison-like boarding school for difficult children, tucked away in the mountains. I convinced myself I had found happiness. For years, I drifted in a bubble of superficial perfection. I had Parker, his beautiful girls, and my endless wealth. I was safe. The instant the bubble burst, it felt less like a dramatic pop and more like a slow, deliberate strangulation. It wasn't a friend or an enemy who told me. It was a stray email notification on Parker's unattended tablet. The message was a sickeningly sweet exchange with his lawyer about divorce papers and asset division. He had gone beyond cheating on me. He had been systematically dismantling my financial fortress, planning to walk away with half of everything and leave me with the wreckage. Rage, a true, incandescent, self-immolating fury, was the last pure emotion I felt in life. I grabbed the keys to my favorite Italian sports car, determined to drive to the mansion and burn Parker's perfect life to the ground. The confrontation would be legendary, a high society scandal that would ruin him entirely. I never made it past the main gates of the estate. The brakes failed. The sudden, terrifying realization that the pedal was useless, the screech of metal on concrete, the shattering of the windshield, it all happened in a split second. Then, Silence. I remember a strange lightness, a sense of having been forcibly ejected from my own body. When I opened my eyes, I was standing beside the mangled wreckage, untouched, watching the paramedics haul my bloodied, still form out of the car. I was a ghost. My soul, it seemed, was tethered to the earth, trapped in the confines of my coma-bound physical body. I witnessed everything, every whispered conspiracy, every calculating glance. I watched Parker and his smug parents hovering over my limp body in the hospital room, not grieving, but scheming. The doctors say she could be like this for weeks, months, maybe forever, Parker muttered, leaning in close to my seemingly deaf ears. His mother, Martha, sniffed, adjusting her mink stole. Forever is fine, dear, as long as that brat is gone first. He's the rightful heir, remember? 18 now. If he gets that money, we get nothing. My heart, or the phantom echo of it in my spectral chest, plummeted. Kane. He had just turned 18. He was the only thing standing between Parker and the complete plunder of the Stone fortune. They were planning to kill my son. A concern I had never once shown him in life surged through my transparent form. I had to warn him. I traveled instantaneously, a panicked specter drawn by the only blood left on my line. The remote, brutal boarding school was worse than I had imagined, ringed with razor wire, smelling of damp stone and despair. I didn't need to search long. Kane was waiting in his dimly lit dorm room, sitting on his cot. He looked up, his eyes, always too intelligent, scanning the door, the window, the shadows. It was a predator waiting for its prey. And then they arrived. Two hulking, rough-looking students, thugs the Travers family had paid to stage a fatal accident. They barged in, sneering, their fists already balled. What happened next took less than an instant. Kane moved with the economy of a striking viper. There was no hesitation, no emotion, only lethal efficiency. No flinching, no arguments. He reached behind his back and drew a weapon. A crude, yet terrifyingly effective firearm, fashioned from scrap metal and engineering knowledge I had never once bothered to notice he possessed. The boys never had a chance. 2 quick, muffled shots, and they crumpled to the floor. Kane's eyes were utterly vacant, his hands steady as he pocketed the weapon. One of the thugs was still alive. He tried to crawl out of the dorm room. My son simply walked towards him, picking up a paperweight from the desk, something he also seemed to have made himself. "Please," whimpered the thug, holding his bullet wound with one hand while trying to push himself away with the other. "Have mercy." Mercy, it seemed, had been yet another quality he had purged from his soul. My son bashed the would-be assassin in the head with the paperweight, over and over again, until he stopped breathing. My initial relief at his safety was suddenly replaced by a wave of icy horror. This wasn't the cold, quiet boy I had sent away. This was a monster, a creation entirely of my neglect, a prodigy of engineering turned prodigy of murder. Had I ever paid attention, I would have seen the genius in his hands, the focus in his gaze. Instead, I had simply forged him a cage, and he had escaped it, armed and ready. My silent, spectral plea was too late. The monster I feared was already loose. The revenge that followed was meticulous, horrifying, and utterly inescapable for me, the ghost, his sole audience. Kane became the most notorious and unemotional serial killer of the decade, cleaning house with terrifying, methodical precision. Parker first, found drowned in my imported bathtub. Then the twins, Tiffany and Heather, whose charming smiles curdled into silent screams as Kane confronted them in their college dorm, a justice that felt far too harsh, yet somehow deserved. Parker's parents, the staff members who had been in on the plot, the corrupted accountants, the lawyers who drafted the fake documents. Every single person who had conspired to steal my fortune and murder my son was taken out of the world, one by one. I watched, sobbing without tears, a powerless spectator to the harvest of my own bad seeds. Every murder was an execution, and every execution ended the same way. As he watched the life drain from their eyes, Cain would lean in and whisper 3 cold, unwavering words, "For my mother." That phrase, used in the name of such monstrous cruelty, shattered me. He wasn't doing it for me, Abigail Stone, the woman who abandoned him. He was doing it for the idealized, loving figure of a mother he deserved but never had. Finally, he came to my hospital room. He stood over my comatose body, his expensive jacket now stained with the blood of so many people. He looked not at my physical shell, but straight at my invisible form. "I saw through them, Abigail," he said, his voice a low, rough rasp, devoid of feeling. "I knew they were vultures from the day Parker moved in, but you never would have believed me. So I waited. I let them make their move so that I could make mine." He took a slow step closer, the coldness in his eyes deepening. "But they only killed the woman who owned this body," he continued. "The woman who killed my actual mother, the one who was supposed to love me. That was you. My mother died a long time ago, Abigail. The moment you decided I was a burden." My ghost whimpered, but no sound escaped. He reached for the life support machine. "My only regret is that they got to you before I did." A flick of his wrist, a cascade of flatlining beeps. My physical body was gone. As my consciousness began to ascend, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. The police, they had finally caught up. I saw Cain standing there, letting them cuff him, his face impassive, as a voice yelled, "You'll get life in prison for this." Life in prison. Cain simply smirked, amused. "How will I notice the difference?" he said, unimpressed. My final, desperate, agonizing thought, screamed into the void, was a plea, a chance. Please, just one chance to make things right. Save my son from the monster I created. And then, oblivion. The second chance. I woke up trembling. The sheets were silk, cold against my skin. The room was bathed in the familiar, heavy opulence of my primary suite, the one I had shared with Parker, the one I had crashed on the way to confront him for his betrayal. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frenzied drumbeat in the sudden, absolute silence. It was a nightmare, a terrifying, vivid nightmare of blood, betrayal, and my son's descent into a soul-crushing madness. I sat up, sweat cold on my forehead, trying to catch my breath. The world felt too real, too present. The scent of expensive wood polish and old money was heavy in the air. I ran my hands over my legs, my arms. I was whole. I was alive. I reached for the bedside clock. 2 years. I was 2 years in the past. The crash hadn't happened. Parker hadn't finished his plan. Cain was still just a cold 16-year-old, not an 18-year-old serial killer, waiting for a life sentence. The terror of the dream was replaced by a ferocious, almost painful clarity. I had begged for a chance, and I had been given one. I heard voices outside my closed bedroom door, muffled, distinct. One was deep and unfamiliar, the other a low, cutting monotone that froze the blood in my veins. Cain. I crept out of bed, pulling on my simplest silk nightgown, and pressed my eye against the barely ajar door. It was one of the house butlers, a smug, oily man named Harris, standing over my son. Kane was meticulously zipping up a simple black duffel bag, his luggage. "Shame, isn't it, Master Kane?" Heiress said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Summer barely started, and here you are, packing again. Your stepfather and the young mistresses, they must truly miss your quiet presence." Kane paused, his back ramrod straight, and slowly turned. He was already tall, lean, and intensely focused, even 2 years ago. I remembered seeing him as shy, cowardly even, due to his silence. I was a fool. "You should be more concerned with your own debts, Heiress," Kane said, his voice flat, emotionless. "That 3,000 you owe your bookie is rather overdue, isn't it?" Harris's smile vanished. "What?" Kane stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I mean, someone might call him, and I know precisely where to tell him to find you. Do you enjoy having your kneecaps broken, Heiress?" The butler's face went white, his jaw working furiously. "Listen, you little brat." Before Heiress could finish his insult, Kane's right hand shot out, a blur of speed and precision. A sickening crack echoed in the silent hallway. Heiress stumbled back, his nose already gushing crimson. Kane leaned in, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper I couldn't quite decipher, but the effect was immediate. The proud, disrespectful butler was reduced to a shaking, terrified mess. Heiress clutched his bloody nose, bent low from the waist in a grotesque forced bow, and scrambled away down the corridor, muttering apologies and promises of silence. I gripped the doorframe, my entire body shaking. That was the monster I had created. He was capable, violent, and utterly fearless. All that quiet intensity I had mistaken for meekness was a calculated reserve of power. Kane adjusted the strap of his duffel bag, his eyes falling on the cracked mahogany door, and for a terrifying second, I thought he saw me. He walked toward the main staircase, the only sound the soft tap of his expensive, custom-made shoes on the marble floor. He was leaving. I couldn't let him go back to that prison. I burst out of the room, running across the massive gallery in my flimsy nightclothes, a desperate, hysterical woman chasing her fate. "Kane! Stop!" I yelled, skidding to a halt on the top of the stairs. He reached the landing and turned, his dark eyes meeting mine. They were beautiful, intelligent, and completely empty. "Abigail," he said, addressing me by my first name, as he had done since he was 11. It was a formal dismissal of any maternal claim I might have. "I am going back to school. Bags are packed. Better for everyone, right?" "No, wait, please," I gasped, clutching the railing. I ran down the stairs, ignoring the pounding in my bare feet. "Change your plans. Stay here. I want you to stay." A cold, mirthless smile touched his lips, a flash of the killer I had witnessed. "Why? So I can witness Prince Charming and his Barbie doll daughters mock my existence from dawn until dusk? So I can eat at your table and hear you tell me again that my demeanor is too challenging for your delicate life?" His words were sharp blades, slicing through my flimsy composure. He always knew how to hurt me. In my previous life, those words would have sent me retreating in tears, claiming victimization. Now, they were a roadmap of my failures. I reached out, wanting desperately to close the distance, to touch him, to prove I was real. "Please, I just want to." He took a precise, fluid step back, his body language instinctively defensive. His right hand disappeared behind his back, resting near the edge of his bag. The image of the homemade firearm flashed across my mind. I knew, with sickening certainty, that he was ready to draw. Before either of us could move, a wave of security guards in black suits materialized from the shadows of the ballroom entrance, surrounding Kane like a pack of wolves. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The lead guard, a hulking man named Jensen, asked, his hand hovering over his own sidearm. "Step away from her, sir." The situation was far worse than I had ever known. Every single person in this mansion, the staff, the security, my husband, treated my son as an invading enemy, a threat that needed to be contained. And Cain, standing there unflinching, his eyes fixed on the slightest movement from the guards, was perfectly prepared to play the part. They would kill him, and he doesn't even care. "Stop!" I cried, throwing my hands up, my voice cracked with desperate authority. "Everyone, step back. Now, Jensen, take your detail and leave. Go home. I dismiss you all for the day." The guards hesitated, looking confused, but my voice had the sharp ring of a stone command. They backed away reluctantly, melting back into the shadows. When the last guard was gone, Cain remained motionless, watching me, his guard still up. I knew words wouldn't work. His intelligence would dissect every shallow apology. His bitterness would repel every false touch. I needed a grand, desperate gesture, a theatrical display of complete surrender, the kind of drama that would shock him into pausing. I lowered myself slowly, painfully, onto the cold marble floor of the foyer. I knelt, my flimsy nightgown pooling around my knees, my head bowed in total supplication. "Cain?" I whispered, tears finally streaming hot and real down my face. "I am begging you. Do not leave. Give me a chance. Not a summer, not a month. Just give me 1 week to prove to you I'm more than just the monster from our past." I looked up at him, my vision blurred by regret. "After that day, you can do anything you want. You can go back to school. You can tell me I'm worthless. You can even leave this country and never look back. But please, stay. Give me 1 chance to start over." He stared down at me. For the first time in his life, I saw something in his eyes besides cold calculation. It was confusion, disgust. It was as if he were looking at an abomination he did not know how to categorize or process in his shattered mind. Confusion is progress. Anything was better than the cold, detached way he had looked at me just moments ago, or the predatory emptiness of the serial killer in my dream. He stood there for a long, agonizing moment, the silence of the massive hall amplifying the frantic pounding of my own heart. Finally, he exhaled, a silent breath of resignation. "Fine, Abigail. 1 day, I will stay." He placed his duffel bag down by the staircase. "But do not think for 1 second that this changes anything. I am not interested in building bridges, and I am certainly not interested in letting you touch me." My first step was a swift and brutal execution of the old order. I walked through the mansion like a whirlwind, firing Harris and every single member of the house staff who had ever shown Cain disrespect or been complicit in Parker's schemes. They were paid double their severance and ushered out the door, their protests silenced by the icy determination in my voice. They were to be replaced in the coming days with people who would treat the master's son with the reverence he deserved. The mansion was silent, cavernous, and empty, save for the 2 of us. It was a fresh start, a blank canvas where the bloody events of my nightmare could not take root. The next morning, I was determined. I had made a promise, and it started with the simplest, most fundamental maternal task: breakfast. I walked into the massive, professional-grade kitchen, which I had never before entered, and realized I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. My hands, accustomed only to holding designer clutches and credit cards, were clumsy and useless. I attempted to toast bread. I nearly set the toaster oven on fire. I tried to brew coffee. It came out bitter sludge. I settled on toast, jam, and scrambled eggs, placing the plate on the long mahogany dining table. Cain was already there, impeccably dressed, reading a novel, ignoring me entirely. I placed his plate in front of him with a flourish that hid my nervous shaking. There you go. I made eggs. He glanced down at the plate, then looked up at me, one perfect eyebrow raised in silent judgment. He picked up the toast, smeared thickly with the first spread I could find in the pantry, peanut butter. Abigail, he said, his voice quiet, did you forget I'm deathly allergic to peanuts? The memory hit me with the force of a punch. My husband had told me years ago, but I had immediately forgotten the insignificant detail. I had almost poisoned my son on the first morning of his second chance. I stared at the toast, feeling the blood drain from my face. My years of carelessness, my fundamental inability to be a mother, was a physical flaw I couldn't hide. My eyes burned. I hated that he saw me like this, weak, incompetent, crying. I turned away quickly, burying my face in my hands, shoulders shaking as silent sobs racked my body. I'm sorry, I choked out, unable to stop the torrent of self-loathing. I forgot. I'm so sorry. I stood there, exposed and weeping, the sounds of my humiliation echoing in the sterile, grand kitchen. I waited for the sharp, cutting remark, the one that would finalize his judgment of me, but it didn't come. A slow, rhythmic chopping sound started behind me. Then, the hiss of oil in a pan. The delicate aroma of frying onions and garlic began to fill the air. I peeked over my shoulder. Kane was standing at the stainless steel counter, his back to me. His simple white shirt was immaculate, his movements precise and efficient. He was cooking. Yet one more thing I hadn't known about my own son. He was self-sufficient, not thanks to me, but in spite of me. In minutes, he plated 2 new breakfasts, perfectly seasoned scrambled eggs, sliced avocado, and toast spread with cream cheese. Simple, well-made, nourishing. He slid my plate in front of my chair, then sat down and began eating his own, never once looking up at me. I tried to speak, to thank him, to apologize again, but the words caught in my throat, tangled with tears. I had always been good at dramatic, self-serving speeches, but genuine gratitude, genuine humility, rendered me mute. When he finished his portion, he simply stood up, pushed his chair in, and walked out of the kitchen without a word, leaving me alone with the perfect, untouched breakfast he had made. I ate it, every bite, savoring the taste of the first true kindness I had received from my son, and confirming the chilling truth I had witnessed as a ghost. He was not a failure. He was a prodigy waiting to be acknowledged, and a lethal force waiting to be unleashed. I would acknowledge him, I would earn his forgiveness, and I would dismantle the lives of Parker and his greedy family piece by bloody piece, without ever resorting to the murder that had ruined my son in the life I remembered. My redemption began now. The very next morning, I initiated the war. My previous life as a ghost, trapped watching the vultures pick over my assets, was now my greatest weapon. There was no need to hire private investigators or spend months on forensic audits. I knew exactly which accounts Parker had drained, which shell companies his father had set up, and where the incriminating emails, the ones that proved malice, not just infidelity, were hidden. The knowledge was immediate, lethal, and devastatingly precise. I dressed not in my usual designer silks, but in a razor-sharp, custom-tailored suit, my armor. I was no longer the pampered heiress. I was the Stone CEO, back from the dead and looking for blood. Parker was in the gym, blissfully unaware, sending a text to his mistress when I walked in. He looked up, his sweaty, handsome face contorting in annoyance. "Abigail, darling, what are you doing? I thought you were meditating, or something equally dramatic. I have a very important conference call this morning." Calm as the breeze. Without smiling or yelling, I simply dropped 3 manila folders onto the treadmill console. right on top of his phone. The titles were stark: petition for divorce, fraud and malice, motion for temporary restraining order, and SEC filing, illegal insider trading. "That conference call is cancelled, Parker," I said, my voice ice. "In fact, your entire future is cancelled. You have 30 seconds to collect your personal effects, the clothes on your back and nothing else, before security escorts you off the property and the legal papers are filed with the court. Your access to all joint accounts has already been revoked. I know about the missing 10 million, the offshore accounts, and the pre-crash tampering with the brakes." His face drained of color, going from handsome bronze to a sickly, mottled gray. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights, but this headlight was a Stone family freight train, and it was moving at lethal speed. "You don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, scrambling for excuses. "I know everything," I corrected, a dark satisfaction curling in my chest. "You tried to kill me, Parker. You tried to orphan my son and steal his entire inheritance. You are not getting a divorce. You are facing criminal prosecution. You chose the easy route, cheating and murder. I choose the better route, ruin and incarceration." I gave a sharp nod to the new security guard I had hired, a professional, ex-military woman who hadn't been on the Travers payroll. She moved instantly, efficiently seizing his phone. Parker roared, but his fury was impotent against the cold, hard wall of my absolute authority. He was dragged out of the gym, his screams about lawyers and injustice echoing uselessly. The whole confrontation from entry to exit took less than 5 minutes. The first snake had been neutralized. My war against the Traverses was intertwined with my struggle to reconnect with Kane. Every victory in the boardroom felt hollow if I couldn't get through to him. Later that afternoon, I found him in the unused carriage house. It was dusty and cluttered with forgotten antiques, but in the center, Kane had cleared a small space. It was his private kingdom. He was hunched over a workbench, his brow furrowed in concentration, meticulously soldering together tiny, complex metallic components. He was building something elaborate and beautiful, a small, intricate mechanism, though I couldn't tell its purpose. This was the genius I had ignored. I approached slowly, respectfully, not wanting to startle the caged tiger. "That's incredible, Kane!" I said softly. He flinched, not out of surprise but annoyance. He kept working, not looking up. "It's a variable displacement cam mechanism," he stated flatly, "and I would appreciate it if you didn't refer to my private time as an exhibition." "I apologize. I won't interrupt your focus," I promised, taking a distant step back. "But I wanted to ask, when you were little, you were always taking apart my clocks and VCRs. I used to punish you for it." His soldering iron paused, suspended just above the metal. "You sent me away to reform school because of it, Abigail." The blunt cruelty of his memory was a physical pain, but I forced myself to absorb it. He is right. I did that. "That's not what I meant," I said, finding my voice firm despite the shame. "I meant, I saw the gift in your hands. I just never cared enough to foster it. If you stay here, Kane, you can have anything you want. I can set up a full engineering workshop, a lab. I can hire the best minds in the world to mentor you. Not because I want you to make me a weapon, but because I want you to build the future you were meant to create." He put down the soldering iron. He finally looked up. His eyes were the clearest window to his broken soul. "And what if the future I want to create, Abigail, is simply the one where you are gone?" He had won the round. He always won. "Then I will accept that," I said, my voice steady. "But until then, you have the full resources of the Stone Corporation at your disposal. This house is yours. The money is yours. Just tell me what you need, and it will be here." I left before he could deliver another blow, but as I closed the carriage house door, I heard the faint, metallic tap of his soldering iron resuming its work. He had rejected my hand, but he had not rejected the tools. Small progress. The stepsisters were next. Tiffany and Heather, the young mistresses, arrived home later that day, chirping about their upcoming shopping trip in Milan, blissfully unaware their golden parachute had dissolved into thin air. They sauntered into the foyer, dropping several designer shopping bags and looking around the empty, silent hall. "What is this, a wake?" Tiffany complained, her voice nasal and entitled. "Where's Harris? And why is that psycho freak still here?" She gestured dismissively toward Kane, who was sitting silently in the library, calmly reading a book that looked suspiciously like a treatise on materials science. I descended the main staircase, again in my warsuit. My new persona, the one who didn't tolerate disrespect, was already second nature. "Girls," I said, my tone cool and lethal, "a few things have changed. First, Harris and all his cronies are gone. Second, the psycho freak, as you call him, is my son and the sole heir to the Stone estate. You will treat him with respect, or you will not address him at all." Heather giggled nervously. "Oh, come on, Abby. You're joking, right? This is about Parker, isn't it? Did you have a fight?" "Parker is presently in custody pending an investigation into corporate espionage and attempted vehicular homicide," I informed them, dropping the bomb instantly. I watched their faces contort with a mixture of disbelief and dawning terror. "Your father is gone. Your allowance? Cancelled. Your credit cards? Terminated. Your tuition payments? Stopped. You are not Stone property, and as of this moment, you are no longer welcome to reside here." Tiffany's carefully constructed face shattered. "You can't do that! Daddy will!" "Your daddy is facing 20 years in a maximum security prison," I cut in. "You have 60 minutes to pack your essential clothes. I have already arranged for a car to take you to the apartment complex your mother used to reside in. Enjoy the change of scenery." There was no negotiation, no pleading, only instantaneous execution of their ruin. They screamed, they sobbed, they called me a witch, but I stood there, utterly unmoved. They were complicit in the culture of neglect and greed that had nearly destroyed my son. They were collateral damage in my redemption. They were gone by nightfall. The mansion felt lighter, cleaner. The dismantling of the Travers Empire was brutal and quick, driven by my spectral knowledge. Parker's parents, the primary conspirators in the financial fraud, crumbled under the weight of the evidence I provided. They hadn't counted on me knowing the exact date and amount of every illegal transfer. Within a week, the stress and exposure, coupled with my merciless legal team, drove Martha into a highly publicized nervous breakdown, landing her in a private psychiatric facility. Her husband Gerald followed suit after realizing he was facing bankruptcy and a string of civil lawsuits I filed against every single one of his personal assets. I secured a permanent restraining order against Parker, and his position in jail became permanent while he awaited trial. The entire family, who had planned to spend the rest of their lives luxuriating in my wealth, were shattered, ruined, and incarcerated, all within 10 days. It was complete. It was satisfying. It was justice, delivered without a drop of blood. My part of the bargain, the revenge that saved my son from becoming a killer, was done. I went to Kane, sitting in the library 2 weeks later, the day the newspaper headlines confirmed Parker's trial date and Martha's institutionalization. "It's over, Kane," I said, sinking into the chair opposite him. "Parker and his family are ruined. The threat is gone. You are safe. You never have to go back to that school. You can travel, study, build whatever you want, wherever you want. You are free." I waited, my heart soaring with the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. He should have looked relieved, or even pleased. He closed his book slowly, placed it on the side table, and finally looked at me, his eyes the same fathomless black as the night outside. "And I should thank you, Abigail?" he asked, his voice low and devoid of inflection. "No," I whispered, "but perhaps you could call me Mom?" The expression that crossed his face was chilling. It wasn't hate, it was indifference, mixed with a deep, crushing pity. "You took care of the legal problem," he conceded, "but you didn't do it for me. You did it to put an end to your own guilt. I don't know what you saw that night before you asked me to stay. Parker's real plan? Consequences of your actions, maybe? But all you're doing right now is changing your own karma. It has nothing to do with me." He rose from the chair. "The house is quiet, the money is secure. If you're really giving me the option, then I'll use the resources to set up a proper workshop as you suggested. But as for you, Abigail, you have only proven one thing. You are capable of extraordinary things for the wrong reasons." He walked away, leaving me utterly alone in the silent, massive library, the triumph of my vengeance turning to ashes in my mouth. He was right. I had achieved justice, but I hadn't earned a shred of his love or forgiveness. The revenge was instant, but the redemption was failing. I realized with shattering clarity that my presence was the problem. I was the ghost of his neglected childhood, the constant reminder of his suffering. As long as I was here, a pathetic, weeping, apologizing ghost of a mother, he would never be free. That night, I wrote 2 letters. One to my estate lawyer, making Kane the sole executor of my will and transferring the entirety of my shares immediately. The other was a simple, short note to Kane, which I left on his perfect, untouched breakfast plate in the kitchen. "My presence is the only thing keeping you caged. I will remove the cage." I walked out of the mansion and drove my car not toward the main road, but toward the secluded cliff edge overlooking the coast. The place was deserted, remote, and beautiful, the perfect, silent end. I walked to the edge, the cold sea spray a final, chilling embrace against my face. I closed my eyes, ready to step into the final oblivion, praying that in the next life, he would find the love he deserved. I felt a hand grab my forearm and pull me away from the cliff. When I opened my eyes, Kane's own were staring back at me. For the first time in a decade, they were wide with shock and disbelief. Were his feelings not fully extinguished then? Was there still a slither of love there left for me? What did it say of me that only at this very moment, after all this time, I was noticing that he had his father's eyes? "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he said, panting from running all the way here to stop me. I broke. The wall I had built, the one I had needed to execute the traverse, crumbled into dust. I fell to my knees on the cold, damp earth, the tears I had fought for years finally tearing through me in agonizing sobs. "I don't know how to fix it, Kane," I wailed, the sound raw and stripped bare. "I'm sorry for pushing you away. I'm sorry for being so selfish all this time. I know what your plan was. It was me who put you in that situation to begin with. I'm sorry for filling your heart with hatred. I don't know how to be your mother. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." I launched toward him on my knees, a desperate animal seeking absolution, throwing my arms around his waist. I pressed my face into the silk of his shirt, sobbing out decades of guilt and regret. I waited for him to recoil, to push me away, to deliver the final, cutting remark that would justify his freedom. I waited for the defensive step back, but the step back never came. For the first time since he was a small child, he didn't move away. He stood perfectly still, letting me cling to him, letting my tears soak his jacket. I felt his hand lift, hesitantly, and then, with the first tremor of genuine emotion I had ever seen him display, he rested it on the back of my head, a protective weight. His breath was uneven as he spoke, the first two words almost lost in the rush of the wind and the sea. "Welcome home, Mom." Epilogue. The rebuilding. 1 year passed. The old Abigail Stone, the fragile heiress who wilted under pressure, was dead. She had died in the phantom car crash, and her redemption, won that cold night on the cliff's edge, had solidified the woman I was now. I stood at the polished glass wall of the new structure Kane had built. It was the Stone Advanced Engineering Lab, a gleaming, state-of-the-art facility equipped with everything from CNC machines to a clean room. It was magnificent. The vast stone fortune was finally being put to its proper purpose, fueling the mind of a genius. Kane, now 17, was not wearing the bespoke suits of the old life, but a utilitarian, gray work jumpsuit. He was hunched over a sophisticated 6-axis robotic arm he was reprogramming, his dark hair falling over his forehead, utterly absorbed. The terrifying silence was still present, but it was no longer the silence of a coiled predator. It was the silence of deep, satisfying concentration. He was building sophisticated medical prosthetics now. His focus shifted from the mechanism of a homemade firearm to the mechanism of human restoration. He was whole, and he was free. Parker Travers was where he belonged, serving hard time for vehicular homicide, conspiracy, and fraud, his trial having concluded swiftly thanks to the airtight evidence I, the ghost, had collected. The twins, Tiffany and Heather, were last seen drifting between waitressing and low-rent apartments, justice served by gravity. They were a bitter memory, permanently sealed outside the perimeter of our peace. My relationship with Kane was in no way easy, nor was it loud. Rather than exchanging dramatic pronouncements or flowery confessions, our bond was built on the small, bright instance of consistency and quiet acknowledgement. I still couldn't cook, but every morning, without fail, I walked into the kitchen at 6:30. I would pour 2 mugs of terrible, bitter sludge I called coffee, and I would wait. Kane would appear 5 minutes later, take the coffee, sigh dramatically, and then, with his own expert hands, whip up the perfect eggs and avocado on toast for both of us. It was a ritual, my offering, his correction, our shared moment. This morning, as he plated the food, I placed a small box on the counter. No expensive jewelry. What would be the use of it? It was a customized set of precision calibration tools he had been mentioning needing for weeks. He paused, glancing at the box. He thanked me, just not with words. He just looked at me, a quick, intense flick of his dark eyes. "My coffee is perfect this morning, Mom," he said, his voice flat, but the corners of his mouth, the first physical signs of a genuine, internal peace, tugging upward ever so slightly. It was everything. It was the complete, total, soul-deep reward for the years of neglect, the agony of the nightmare, and the months of relentless work. The past was a brutal, bloody chapter closed forever. The future was here, clean and bright, built one perfect breakfast at a time. I was no longer an heiress. I was a mother, finally home. The end.
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.